Alright, today I am back in West Laurel Hill Cemetery just outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I am looking for the gravesite of the woman who is most often credited with creating Mother's Day. But what's even more interesting about her is that within a few years after the first Mother's Day proclamation was declared, she actually began campaigning against it. Anna Jarvis was born to Ann Jarvis on the first day of May in 1864 in the town of Webster, West Virginia. She was the ninth of 11 children, although some sources say there may have been as many as 13 children. In the end, only 4 survived into adulthood. Childhood death from diseases was somewhat common in these rural regions of the country in those days, and that actually becomes a part of the story. Because of this high infant mortality rate, Ann Jarvis created what were called Mother's Day work clubs in towns throughout Western Virginia in the 1850s. Also remember, the area we call West Virginia today was all still part of Virginia in the 1850s. West Virginia was created in 1863 when that region decided not to secede from the Union. So it was granted statehood in 1863, a year before Anna Jarvis was born. Alright, so getting back to these clubs raised money for medicine. They hired women to work for families in which mothers suffered from things like tuberculosis. They inspected bottled milk and food. And in 1860, local doctors supported the formation of these clubs in other towns. So the idea grew, and so it was no small thing that the mother was doing here. The work she was doing was kind of a big thing. When the Civil War broke out, she wanted the clubs to remain neutral, so she helped soldiers and families from both sides of the war. Anna Jarvis was said to have been inspired to create a day to honor mothers after her mother said a prayer in 1876 that someone should work to start such a day memorializing mothers. So that's supposedly where the idea comes from. And in 1902, when her husband and Anna's father died, Ann Jarvis moved to Philadelphia to be with her children, who had all moved to the area at that time. Ann Jarvis died on May 8, 1905. So in the coming years, Anna Jarvis would continue this movement to honor mothers, and by 1908 she organized the very first Mother's Day Observances. One was held at Andrews Methodist Church in West Virginia, where her mother taught Sunday school, and another was held at the Wanamaker Store Auditorium in Philadelphia. Her efforts continued, and a few years later, President Woodrow Wilson signed the first national proclamation for Mother's Day in 1914. She used the white carnation as a symbol for the day. But over time, the price of carnations increased, and then the candy companies and greeting card companies got involved, and she actually began campaigning against the day. She described people who purchased cards as being too lazy to write the woman that did more for them than anyone else. She also attacked people who purchased candy as saying, oh, that you just go visit your mother with the candy, then you end up eating most of the candy. Through the 1920s, her campaign against commercialization of the day continued, and in 1925, she was arrested for disorderly conduct after disrupting a convention of war mothers in Philadelphia. She was angry that they were selling white carnations. Eventually, the judge hearing the case eventually threw out the charges because he essentially cited her work at creating Mother's Day as a reason for throwing out the charges. Through the rest of her life, into the 1940s, she continued her efforts to have the day rescinded, or at least argue against the commercialization of it. She died in 1948 while living at a place called Marshall Square Sanitarium in Westchester, Pennsylvania, and obviously her efforts to rescind Mother's Day as a holiday had failed, and we continue to celebrate it to this day. If you are interested in visiting the gravesite of Anna Jarvis, she is again buried in West Laurel Hill Cemetery in Ballackinwood, Pennsylvania, in what's called the river section. One landmark to look for is near the intersection of Montgomery Avenue and Norton Avenue. Now, when I say Montgomery Avenue, there's, of course, a major road that runs through this area called Montgomery Avenue. That's not the same. This is a street within the cemetery. called Montgomery Avenue. So you probably won't find that on a map. You'll only find that once you get into the cemetery. So you look for that intersection, then you kind of look towards the river section, and her gravesite there's bushes on each side, so it's kind of obvious that way. And it's larger than a lot of the tombstones around it, so you shouldn't have any trouble finding it. So that's it. Thank you for watching this video. I appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed it.